So good evening and welcome to our Future Farm Resilience Mental Health Rural Support and Wellbeing webinar. Today's topic is notifiable diseases. That's including blue tongue, avian influenza, and then there'll also be some wellbeing bits there. We just have a bit of housework which we just have to go through. So for anyone that doesn't know how to use or hasn't used Teams before, on the screen now is our instructions about how to use little bits. So you've got the camera and microphone options there. So if you've got anything that you want to ask, then please do so. You can either do that by raising your hand, muting yourself with the microphone, but also you can add anything into the chat. So we just have a disclaimer here. If anyone wouldn't want their name or anything being shared with the presentation and the recording that goes out to everyone that's registered, then please do contact myself or my colleague Nikki. And on the screen there is our email address and also our phone number. So you can always get in contact with us, and if there's any questions that you'd like to contact us, but you don't feel able to do so and to share tonight, then let us know, and then we can always contact the speakers and get the answers for you after today. So tonight's speakers, we have Nee Bedford from Mental Health Matters. We've got Sarah Lloyd, which is from Animal Plant and Health Agency, with veterinary inspector, and we've got Nicola Pearce from Heart of the Southwest Trading Standards. So our first speaker tonight is Nee Bedford. So I'll hand over to you, Nee. Hi, Nee, you there? Oh, we seem to have lost Nee all of a sudden for some reason, and I'm not quite sure why. Sarah, could we go to your slides and do your presentation first? Thank you. I'll just stop sharing my screen. And then you should be able to share yours.
Can you see that okay?
Yeah, perfect. Thank you.
Great. So good evening, everyone. Thank you for listening to these talks. So as Sam said, my name's Sarah Lloyd and I'm a senior veterinary inspector and work for the Animal Plant and Health Agency. So I work in the West 5 team and we cover the Somerset and Dorset area. We do cover a large work area in the agency, so I have picked kind of livestock markets as an area to cover this evening just because there's too many other areas to cover all in one go. So first off, I just wanted to, I'm sure most of you have had some kind of communication with the agency, whether that be through telephone conversations or whether that be through on-farm visits, but you may not be fully aware of kind of the scope of the work areas that we cover. So the APHA is an executive agency of DEFRA, which is the Department of Environment, Food and Rural Affairs, and it used to be known as MAF. We also work on behalf of the devolved administrations, so the Welsh and Scottish governments. So our main remit as an agency is to safeguard farm animal welfare, as well as maintaining plant health, and that's for the benefit of the people, environment, and the economy as well. So we're kind of, because of the devolved administrations within England, there's 14 different field teams, So England's split into 14 regions, and each has a local APHA field team, and that consists of a number of vets, animal health officers, egg marketing inspectors, and also obviously line management as well. So as I mentioned, we cover a large area of work, with our main responsibilities being listed on the slide. So one of the highest priority works that we do is safeguarding farm animal welfare. We identify and control endemic and exotic diseases and pests in animals, plants, and bees. So when we're thinking about endemic diseases, we're thinking about diseases that are already common in the UK, such as TB, and exotic diseases would be those diseases that we don't usually see as a routine in the country. So that would be something like avian influenza. I was going to mention bluetongue, but obviously at the moment that is, but it's not something we'd usually expect to be present in the country. We do a lot of work on disease surveillance and risk identification. So what diseases could we get? How likely are we to get them? When might this happen? And what would be the impact if it did happen? We have a specific team which do a lot of scientific research, so covering all types of kind of bacterial, viral, prion, and parasitic diseases. And they also do work on vaccine and food safety as well. We do that via a series of veterinary investigation centres across England, with our main lab being based in Weybridge. We facilitate international trade in all areas, and that covers kind of the diversity from farm animal species import and export to the movement of exotic animals into and out of the UK. As it says on the slide, we do license and process registrations to protect endangered wildlife. There's a programme to support beekeepers, and also responsible for regulating the safe disposal of animal byproducts. And that's to reduce the risk of potentially dangerous substances entering the food chain. So as I said, it'd be impossible to try and cover that all in a short space of time. So I think in terms of the audience that this presentation is for, that actually looking at markets kind of covers a few of those areas and is probably most relevant for you. So just wanted, because there's a few people that are involved in the movement of animals through a market, I just thought we'd briefly go through kind of who's responsible for what. So obviously as a keeper, you're responsible for maintaining the health and welfare of your animals under your care under the Animal Welfare Act 2006. So that's while the animals are on farm. But you also need to ensure that if those animals are transported, they are fit to be transported. And then if you look at the actual transporter, so obviously sometimes that is yourself as a keeper, but if it is someone else that's doing that transport for you, it's making sure that the welfare of the animals is maintained during the loading and unloading of the animals, and also during the actual period of transport itself. So this, for the transporter, also includes responsibility of ensuring care to whoever the animals are delegated to. So whoever takes over their care at the market needs to be competent to do so. However, one thing I would say is that in some instances, obviously that animal has to be fit to transport, and it is the responsibility of both the keeper who puts it into that transport and the transporter to make sure it is fit for transport. If an animal gets to market and it's found that it shouldn't have been transported, there's a potential both the keeper and the transporter will be found at fault. So next, if we're looking at obviously when the animals are actually arrive at the market and they're unloaded, the welfare of the animals temporarily becomes the market operator's responsibility. And again, they need to ensure that they can meet the animals' needs. So it is, for a good market operator, they should clearly communicate what keepers should be bringing in and what isn't acceptable, and act to quickly prevent sale of unsuitable animals. And then we get to ourselves as the APHA. So we're responsible for regulating markets. So we do the market approvals and we work with the markets to ensure they follow the current legislation and provide advice and guidance where needed. And we work really closely with Trading Standards as they are our enforcement agency. So they're responsible for enforcing the legislation and have the authority to serve legal notices and obviously more serious cases potentially take cases to prosecution as well. So I'm not going to go through this in loads of detail, but there's a whole load of legislation that governs what happens in a market. The different piece of legislation is broadly separated in three areas. So looking at biosecurity, welfare and traceability. So the legislation surrounding biosecurity ensures that all markets have to be approved by the APHA and meet certain requirements in order to reduce the potential risk the gathering of animals at a market poses. The legislation relating to biosecurity requires all the market operators to ensure that the market is appropriately clean and disinfected, but it also relies on you as keepers to make sure that any animals coming into the market, the vehicles that they're coming in are appropriately clean and disinfected, or you sign the self-declaration to say that will be done on return to your home premises. Looking at kind of the second bubble on that slide, so the welfare legislation covers both the transport of the animals and also the time that they're in the market itself. And that's legislation, the requirements outlined in that legislation depend on obviously the species involved, but also the age of the animal as well, and certain requirements will be for one group and not another. And finally, the traceability. So requirements for each species is covered by a different piece of legislation. However, the principles remain the same. So it should be possible to trace all the movements of animals as individuals from the place of birth to the market, and then obviously subsequently from the market to their destination. So just having a bit more of a focus on animal welfare, it's looking at the definition of unfit or fit. So in the legislation, there's two main bits of legislation we're going to consider here. So WATO, which is the Welfare of Animals in Transport Order, and WAMO, which is the Order for Markets. And the definition is slightly different between the two. And as you can see, I've put on the slide that under the Transport Order, the definition is a bit looser. It doesn't cover as many things. So under WATO legislation, animals that are severely lame, have open wounds, are heavily pregnant, or have just calved would be considered unfit for transport. However, under the market order, no ill animals should be exposed to sale, but this includes all of the above covered in the transport order and more. So this is something you need to consider before sending the animal to market, because it needs to meet the requirements of both legislation, because it could be they're fit for transport, but when they get to the market, they're not actually fit for sale. So I just want to highlight some of the things we commonly see at markets. So as an agency, we do market visits, and also obviously Trading Standards do as well. And these are probably some of the more common conditions that we see. So lameness, so the inability to walk correctly. So just because your sheep or cow can stand on all 4 feet doesn't mean it's not lame. The lameness needs to be assessed when the animal is in motion, and it might only be able to see severe lameness when the animal if they're not weight bearing properly on one limb. But there is a large range of different kind of degrees of lameness, from very mild to very severe, and kind of the grade of lameness might would determine any further action that need to be taken. Open wounds, so this might be it's a really fresh wound that's just happened from an incident at transport, and it might still be actively bleeding, or it might be there's a wound that's been there for some time and has obvious more long-term changes. But these animals shouldn't be presented for sale, given the definition outlined in the market order. So prolapses, they can be seen in any farm animal species, and uterine prolapses being the most common. Again, they're not fit for sale. It could be a fresh prolapse, it could be something that's happened and been there for a little while, but again, given that definition, they shouldn't be at market and presented to be sold. And the same with mastitis. So any inflammation of the mammary gland, we commonly see it with dairy cows, and if left untreated, it can cause really severe changes and discomfort for that animal. So those conditions are obviously mainly individuals would be affected by them. There are also another set of diseases, which obviously more contagious conditions, which not only have welfare for the individual animal, but potentially have implications for other animals in the market, as well as people handling those animals. So on the left-hand side of this slide, we've got ringworm. So a fungal infection spread easily by direct contact between animals, and the spores of the ringworm, so the dermatophyte, survive really well in the environment. So it does mean that an animal infected with ringworm has potentially contaminated the environment in the market, which will then be picked up by a naive animals, which will then become infected. So obviously you can see the implications of bringing an animal with ringworm into market space and potentially infecting other animals that are there. Again, I mean, all these diseases. So the other thing with ringworm, as well as ORF, is the zoonotic component to it as well. So it's so they can potentially, there has been instances where the infections can be zoonotic, and especially for kind of young or immunocompromised people. So that's another consideration as well. So sheep scab, again, it's highly contagious. This is covered by the sheep scab order of 97, and that actually gives local authorities the powers to basically improve the control of the disease. So they can prevent movement of sheep that are visibly affected, enforce treatment, and go on, Nicola.
A question has just come up. Can ORF transfer to humans?
So I looked into this because I was surprised, but I did find a piece of research that said it could. So I'll try and find out where that source was, and I can post it in the chat afterwards.
Lovely, thank you.
Right. Yeah, so in terms of sheep scab, you've got that legal requirement as well to make sure the animals are treated. And that is a type of mite. And then, yeah, finally ORF. So that's a type of pox virus. You get these proliferative lesions around the muzzle and also potentially around the coronary bands. And like ringworm, it remains infective in the actual scabs and contaminated environment for months. So it is something that is quite hard to control. And if you bring it into that environment of a market where other animals might be exposed to it, then obviously you're putting others at risk as well. So with these, not only do the conditions have welfare implications for the affected animals, but potentially they will affect other animals in direct contact or via contamination of the environment. And that's what's so important, not to bring these into the market environment, because you're potentially infecting others as well then. And just obviously wanted to mention about notifiable diseases. So the other two slides have shown obviously conditions that will affect the welfare of the animals that have those conditions, but the notifiable diseases are obviously required to be reported by law. The full list obviously of the diseases are on the gov.uk website, And I put a few examples on the slide there. So these diseases that are not usually found in the UK, and any suspicion of the disease needs to be reported to us as an agency immediately. And the report needs to come from either the keeper or a private veterinary surgeon. If there was any suspicion of notifiable disease at the origin premises in any of the animals on that premises, of any susceptible species, or during the loading process, that animal or any other animals on the premises shouldn't be moved, just because markets present as a high risk for disease spread. If you think there's a number of animals come from multiple different places, come into relatively close contact in the market, and then travelling sometimes long distances to the destination premises. So it's a really good way of rapidly disseminating these really serious diseases. So yeah, any concern at all with any of the animals on the origin holding, those animals shouldn't be moved. And the risk kind of depends on how the disease is spread. So obviously got topical bluetongue at the moment, it's spread by the midge factor. So it's not going to be as easily spread as say something like foot and mouth, which can be easily spread by fomites. And therefore, the concern of how quickly and how wide it could spread would be greater for that rather than bluetongue. And obviously, because of the type of disease these are, they're notifiable, and the place where they're initially found would become classed as infected premises. So obviously, it has implications for that place. It would have implications for the market, but also there's much wider implications in the UK itself, but also on the trade to other countries as well. So there's a lot to consider with those diseases. So in terms of if we identify problems at a market, kind of what would you do next? So obviously suspicion of notifiable disease needs to be reported to us immediately. And then it kind of trigger a whole series of events afterwards. So service of restrictions and movement restrictions as well. For any other problems, there's kind of a different actions that might be taken. So the animal might need to be isolated, and that might be to prevent further spread of some kind of infectious or contagious disease, or potentially to prevent further injury if they've already got an open wound or something. In some instances, you'll be able to provide treatment, but more for minor problems. It's a little bit more difficult to do in a market setting. If the animal, say, was unfit for sale, but fit for transport, then it may be taken to the closest abattoir for slaughter, and that's to minimise the risk of compromising the animal welfare. If the animal is not fit for sale, not fit for transport, then the only real option in that case would be for it to be euthanized in the market. So obviously there's a whole scale of things that can happen there, and it depends on the severity of the welfare concern as to what the next step would be. So I just wanted to put this on here, and and the number is available on the website, but all calls that we receive come through the 03000 number. And basically there are a series of steps that will guide you to the right team. There is also the customer advice email address. I do just want to stress that obviously anything important and high priority, so any suspicion of notifiable disease, any serious welfare concern, these need to be telephoned in to us to ensure they get the right urgency of response. The customer advice email mailbox is not monitored outside of normal working hours or over a weekend. So again, if there's something that needs to be addressed, if there's something that you noticed on Friday night that needs to be addressed before Monday morning, there's no point emailing us. It needs to be rung in. And there is a local duty vet on all the time. So there is always someone to speak to. And if they don't answer straight away, you leave an answering message, they will ring you back as soon as they can. So it's just something to be aware of, that sometimes we get delays in people reporting stuff because it's a weekend or it's an evening. but there is someone there all the time to speak to. So great, thank you very much for listening, and happy to take any questions.
Thank you, Sarah. That was really interesting. I found that really interesting, and I really appreciate Robin coming up with a question there, and Nicola joining in then. So is there any questions from anyone? Has anyone got anything they'd like to ask while we have Sarah available for us tonight?
Oh, hi, Sarah. It's Nikki.
Oh.
Apologies for being late this evening. I was doing some driving ponies around and it got a bit late, so I apologise about that. And thanks, Sam, for stepping in, and Nicola, that's really appreciated. I was just going to ask about, you were mentioning about the GT Vet. I'm sorry if you did say this and I missed it for being a bit late. But did you say when we do ring in, when people do ring in kind of out of hours, there is somebody there 24/7, and obviously they'll get back to them as soon as they can. Do you have, did you say it was one per area, or can they still go through on the main number, or do they need individual number for each area?
No, it goes through the main switchboard, and then they get diverted to the area. So yeah, you'd still ring that same number and they'd put you through to the right local GT Vet then.
Excellent, thank you. That's brilliant. I just wanted to clarify that was all for any members of public or farmers that want to call in.
Yeah, no, and I think the other thing, like I said, in terms of the email, because that mailbox isn't monitored, there should be an automatic reply on it as well saying that. But it's just that if something needs to be dealt with, it needs to be rung in and not emailed in.
Brilliant. No, that's great, because like you say, we do rely on email quite a lot these days, don't we? So it's nice to know that we do. Yeah, we do need to make sure that we make the physical phone call when it's out of hours.
Thanks, Nikki.
Oh, brilliant. Thank you.
Sorry, can I just add in? This is the thing with me and Nikki, we both always have something to say, is so if someone has any concerns about their livestock, so if they're ringing up for a welfare or a disease purpose, obviously they could call in, but they could take pictures and then email them in so you guys can see things. Is that how things normally work? Is that the best way you guys want to receive stuff, Sarah?
Yeah, I think again, if it's something that needs urgent attention, if you ring and say, I've sent emails of, I've sent pictures of this, then that's absolutely fine, because we've notified that information is going to be there. And especially as you're right with kind of any welfare issues. So we get a lot of reports from members of the public or anonymous reports, which we don't know where they've come from, reporting welfare concerns. And it's really helpful if you've got photographic evidence. And the same with notifiable disease calls is that if we can see lesions, then we can make a more or better informed decision if we can see what you're reporting. Because I've worked for a number of years in small animal practice, and what one person thinks is a broken leg is a Cocker Spaniel running around on all four legs, wagging his tail. So yeah, I think the perception varies between people. So I think actually if you've got some kind of photographic or video evidence, that's great. That's the more evidence we've got, the better. But
perfect. And Nicola, you've got your hand up.
Yeah, do the vets use what 3 words for identifying, or do you find the public are starting to use that?
They are starting to use it more, and our customer advice team. So when during working hours, when people ring in, the calls get triaged by our admin team. So it's like a customer advice team who triage the calls, and then they'll get passed on to one of the vets. And they will routinely now ask for what 3 words. I think people get more used to giving those, just because the rural postcodes can cover half a county sometimes. But so yeah, what 3 words is really useful. Just to try and pinpoint, because you can imagine some, on common grade, there's areas where you could be wandering around for hours and not find the animals that you're meant to be looking for. So yeah, it's much better if you can get what 3 words.
Yeah, especially if they can give you a description as it's along a hedge and by a tree.
Yeah.
There's quite a few of them in Devon.
Yeah.
Okay, perfect. Anyone else got anything to add? If not, we'll give Sarah a break and we'll move on to Nee. Okay, perfect. If you could stop sharing your screen, then I'll share mine again. Ready?
I am, thank you.
Lovely.
Apologies for earlier.
It's okay.
My name is Nee Bedford. I'm the area manager for mental health matters, and we have a contract in Devon to provide some mental health support services. So I've come along this evening just to be able to kind of explain to everybody who we are and what we do. So if I could have the next slide, Sam, please. So MHM actually had the pleasure of coming along last month as well to talk a little bit about our National Rural Helpline. But we're a national mental health charity. We have celebrated our 40th birthday this year, and we have services that we offer up and down the country, kind of in each corner, really, and are supporting a large number of people every day with their mental health. Next one, please. The vision that we have as an organisation is that everybody can access support for their mental health and live a meaningful life in a society free from stigma. And so that vision kind of sits behind the ethos of everything that we do. Next slide, please. So the mental health support service that we run across Devon and Torbay is called The Mooring. And we're an inclusive service for anybody that's aged 18 or over. And we support people who are experiencing some kind of emotional distress or are having difficulty with their mental health. We also support individuals who are kind of concerned about their relatives or their loved ones, somebody that they are in a personal relationship with. It kind of gives them an opportunity to actually be able to kind of share some of their experiences of that as well. So our aim is to provide a welcoming space for people to be able to come in and feel comfortable and able to open up about whatever it is that they are finding that they are struggling a little bit with, really. We're open year round, and all of our services are open across evenings and weekends and bank holidays. So we're around over periods like Christmas and New Year and Easter. A lot of the time, the purpose of our service is about making sure that actually at sort of past 5 o'clock, Monday to Friday, when lots of other services are kind of closing up, that actually there's still somewhere else that people know that they can go to be able to get access to some support in that moment, as opposed to kind of having to struggle throughout the rest of the evening or the weekend until things kind of open back up again. So we support people who are feeling distressed or anxious or overwhelmed or who are in need of a listening ear. We are a non-clinical service, so it is. We have a team of really dedicated individuals who are there to listen to people and to provide that very person-centered support. We're quite small teams, even though we cover the wide geography of Devon and Torbay, and we have 3 sites that we are able to do our face-to-face work from. We have one in Barnstaple, one in Exeter, and one in Torquay. Next slide, please. So in terms of how people can access our service, we try to give as many options as we can so that people can use whichever method kind of works best for them. So we do a lot of work over the phone, and people are in those 3 services are also able to take telephone calls from people. We do video calls. We have people who walk in to see us face to face, and we're also expanding our group work activities. And some people use all 4 of those ways of making contact with us, depending on what feels like the best fit for that particular day. Other people may only ever contact us over the phone. It doesn't matter. We're more than happy to engage with people in whatever way will work best for them. Next slide, please. So in terms of accessing the support that we have, no referral is needed, and we're called an open access service. So you don't need to have a mental health diagnosis, for example. You don't need to be referred by anybody. It is literally for anybody who feels as if they need to have that opportunity to have a conversation with somebody, talk something through, be able to share their concerns, where they're feeling, look for some kind of support and possibly some direction and some advice as well, because we try to help people to develop skills in terms of being able to self-manage their mental health distress as well. So it's about meeting the person where they are and providing them with that kind of comfortable listening ear when they need it. We do a lot of work with people around producing what we call staying well or safety plans, which is about producing something and actually having something written and structured that actually gives people a reminder of the things that they can do to actually get themselves through a particular period of difficulty. And we also do a lot of signposting to other services as well. So the teams are very good at understanding what's around in their local communities and what other things we think might actually be useful for people to be able to link in with. And we provide signposting and referral to those services as well. Next slide, please. So it's very much about supporting people with whatever it is that is going on for them in the moment. But as some examples of some of the things that we would be supporting people with, there are things around loneliness and isolation, about having feelings or thoughts about wanting to take their own lives or to self-harm. Could be relationship issues, worsening mental health, grief and loss, feeling overwhelmed, just needing somewhere to kind of have a space to just be able to kind of talk things through in a supportive way. And in our exam areas, we also find that we support a lot of people who are making that transition into living on their own for the first time, and some of the difficulties and stresses that can come along with that. Next slide, please. So as I mentioned, we've got 3 services across Devon. So our Barnstaple service is actually based right on the edge of Barnstaple bus station in the Voice meeting rooms, which is North Devon's radio station. We are open there Thursday through to Monday, so 5 nights a week from 6 p.m. through to midnight. And then our telephone number and our email address is on the screen as well. If I could have the next slide, please. Then we have our Exeter service that's actually based at Wamford House, and we have some daytime hours in Exeter. It's our only service where we're open in the day as well, but we are open there Monday to Friday 10 till 10:30 and Saturdays and Sundays from 1:30 to 10:30. And the next slide, please. Then we have our Torbay service that has just recently moved on to the Torbay Hospital site. We're just on the edge of the site there. We're open Monday to Friday from 6 till 10:30, and Saturdays and Sundays it's 1:30 to 10:30. So it's about trying to, as I mentioned, kind of have that opportunity for that support through the evenings and across weekends for people to have somewhere to be able to reach out to. Next slide, please. So to give you a little bit of an idea about some of the things that we've done and some of the impact that we've been able to have, there are a few sort of facts and figures, I guess, here. For us, it's really important to remember that behind all of the numbers, all of those people are individuals, but we have been able to support diverting people away from A&E and from emergency services, which is part of what our support is there to do as well, to provide an opportunity for people to have a space where they can kind of have those conversations in a way that that is away from that kind of more sort of medical based sort of environment, really. but we have prevented 262 incidents of self-harm, and we've also supported to prevent 319 suicide attempts. I could have the next slide, please. Just a little bit of feedback to give you a little bit of a sense of what some of our service users have kind of said after they've been in to see us. It's important for us that we put the individuals who come in to see us at the centre of everything that we do, and it is very much about trying to respond to whatever is going on for them in a supportive and non-judgmental way. Everybody struggles with different things at different times, and it's about trying to support people to remove that stigma and to feel comfortable to be able to reach out when they're in need of some support. If I could have the next slide, please. So I just was going to finish with our website, where there's some additional information about the services and all of the contact details that I've included in the presentation. And we also have a Facebook page where we will regularly post different bits and pieces that we have coming up, new group sessions, for example, that might be running, those sorts of things. So the Facebook page kind of provides some up-to-date information about what's going on with us. And that's me, thank you. If anybody has got any questions, I'm very happy to take them.
I just seem to have a couple more slides for you.
I mean, you're very welcome to sort of whiz through them, if you see what I mean, but they are kind of our sort of standard bits to have in terms of our values and our vision. So
I'll whiz through just so people can see them if they really want to.
That'd be lovely, thanks.
Why Sam does that for me. Oh, thanks ever so much for coming in. You made it through the presentation without cutting out, so that was brilliant.
We're always so easily pleased.
Yeah. If it you get the chance to speak and there's no internet glitches and stuff, it's always a positive, isn't it?
Absolutely.
I just wanted to ask, and I know it's probably really difficult. It's a bit difficult to comment because everyone's going to be slightly different in kind of the support that they're going to require. But I was just wondering if you can give like a few examples or like different things, because I'm guessing obviously people can come into you and then they can have a conversation, and you kind of they can kind of speak freely about how they're feeling or things that are happening to them. But what kind of things do you then do to kind of try and help to support them?
And I think you're right, Nikki, in the sense that it does depend on what's going on for that kind of individual, and there's lots of different things that we do. And we also, some people use our service in a way that kind of helps them to kind of maintain their mental health, and we kind of become sort of part of their toolkit, if you like, in terms of just being able to come in, have that opportunity to just sometimes talk about what they've done that day, or for us to help them plan what it is that their next few hours are going to look like, or what the next kind of day or two might look like, in terms of them being able to kind of help with that kind of planning. We have other people who just kind of might ring us once or twice while they're going through a particularly difficult period, and then we may not hear from them for a really long period of time until they kind of come back to us at any point that they need us. So and in those occasions, sometimes it is just about having somebody who's not involved in the situation, and just having that kind of independent person to just be able to speak to in that kind of open and supportive way. And it can be about anything, really, anything that is causing difficulty. So it could be that we might have people who are struggling with a particular thing at work, and sometimes we might be able to talk them through different ways that they could go about approaching their employer, for example, or the other people that they're working with. So sometimes it's about trying to help people to just sort of almost action plan, if you like, in terms of how to be able to kind of navigate their way through whatever the situation is that is causing them some difficulty. And sometimes it's about making sure that we are plugging them into other specialist services. So we might have somebody who has experienced a loss and they are going through a grieving process. It could be that actually it feels as if it would be useful for them to be able to think about some specialist counselling, and then we're able to kind of provide them with some support and in terms of being able to find a suitable service for them to access.
That's brilliant. Thanks, Nee. I just sometimes I know that the support's there, and then I just always wonder if someone asks me kind of what would they do for you, or how can they support you? I'd be a bit like, oh,
Yeah.
okay, I know they're there, but actually I don't really know what they do apart from you can contact them. So sometimes it's just quite nice to hear like some examples of things, if that's okay. So
Yeah, of
no,
course.
that's brilliant. Thank you.
Can I just ask, is there a restriction on who you can help? Is there like an age restriction or anything with you guys?
Only in the sense that we are sort of adult funded, if you like.
Okay,
So it's
yeah.
18 and over. There's no upper age limit.
Yeah.
And with our 16 and 17-year-old, we try to operate what we call a no wrong door policy. So 16 and 17-year-olds are just in that kind of transition process, if you like, from kind of children and adolescent services into adulthood. And we will occasionally get somebody in that age group that will contact us. If we do, we will support them in the moment with whatever is kind of going on for them at that point, with a view to then being able to, again, kind of signpost them and link them into services that would be able to support them a little bit more longer term. But upwards of 18, there's no upper age limit. So
wonderful. So I presume anyone that did contact you younger that didn't understand that, you'd be able to like signpost them to the correct people, but
absolutely.
be there in the initial bit. Perfect.
Yes.
Lovely. Thank you.
No problem.
I was really interested with your statistics as well. That I was a little bit slow with the slides then. I think just because it just took me back about how many people, it's amazing the amount of people you've helped and prevented a loss, because obviously people suffering with suicidal thoughts and everything is, for them it's an awful experience, but also the families that many families, you've stopped them suffering and them having, you know, mental health issues then from a grief and not so I think that's amazing, and I think you guys are doing a brilliant job.
Thank you, Sam. We're it's kind of the reason that the teams kind of get up in the morning, I guess, really, is that actually they want to be there to support people and to try to kind of make a difference, really, and help people to kind of see a way through some of those really dark times that people sometimes experience. That's what we're about.
Yeah, no, I think that's brilliant. Thank you for joining us today.
No problem. Thanks very much for the opportunity to come along.
Nicola, are you available? And we will move on to your slides. And then if there's any more questions that come in for you, Nee or Sarah, well, then obviously we will pass them on, but people may have some questions at the end as well. But if you need to go, obviously, I know you're working as well, then please feel free and we can always contact you afterwards.
Okay, I'm ready.
Perfect. Oh, here we go.
Good evening. I'm Nicola Pearson. As Sam has said, I am a Training Standards Officer with the Heart of South West Training Standards Service, with a specialist interest in diseases and registration. Next slide, please, Sam. The main changes, or the legislation that the changes are actually coming under, most people know this, is the Avian Influenza Preventative Measures England Regulation 2006, with the amendment in May this year. Next slide, please. Basically, why are they bringing this change about? Well, in 2020-21, saw some 360 cases within the UK shores, and a significant number of these outbreaks and confirms were in the backyard flocks, which there isn't or wasn't currently a requirement for those flocks to be registered, which of course then meant a lot of us training standards officers had to hit the streets and knock on doors to establish where flocks were, to enable to give them the information that they needed to protect their birds. And because a lot of these are pets, so, you know, nobody wants their pets to be ill. The rule was they came from May and they had up to the 1st of October to actually register their birds. And it's not so that if we have an outbreak in the area that they will be culled or anything like that. It is purely to enable us not to have to knock on every door, but also to get the information quickly to you. Next slide, please. Little background on avian influenza. It wasn't actually called avian influenza until 1878, so it's obviously been around a very long time. Prior to that, it was called fowl plague, and the first case was documented in northern Italy. In 1918, there is a possible link to the Spanish flu, which killed a phenomenal amount of people. And I think most people went on for 2 years before they actually got the infection under control. And of course, that strain was the H1N1 strain. But of course, like everybody knows, influenza mutates and becomes different strains. Next slide, please, Sam. Relatively in the UK, we were quite safe until about 2006, where we had our first outbreak. And then the preventative measures were brought in to try and safeguard our flocks. And it was considered that the food chain, we had more than 50 birds generally, they were the ones we really needed to know about to enable them to take preventative measures. So they were then required to register, and they were obviously inspected as and when necessary. And then the virus in 2021 reached the Americas, which made it a lot more known. 2023, the avian influenza H5N1 was considered endemic in the wild bird population. So basically, most of the birds probably have it. And this is why we really have to look after our own flocks. Next slide, please. What is the definition of poultry in the legislation? Poultry means all birds that are reared and kept in captivity for the production of meat or eggs for consumption, or commercial products, or for restocking. So that really covers the commercial side of things. Poultry is considered your turkeys, guinea fowl, ducks, geese, quails, pigeons, and doves, which a lot of people expect. But it also covers your peacocks, your peahens, and your ostriches, your rhea, and everything like that. So virtually every bird which is kept in captivity is captured by this legislation. And additionally now, captive birds also means birds which are not necessarily considered poultry, which includes your pet birds. So it's your budgies, your cockatoos, and that sort of things which are kept for shows or races or exhibition. So it's not just things that are kept as people think of the poultry in the garden. Next slide, please. The key changes to this legislation, they reduce the threshold for the number of birds which you require to register. So basically, if you have one bird to 49 birds, you should have registered them by the 1st of October this year. It is being a separate registration to the commercial ones, which are 50 more than birds. There are some exclusions, which I'll go through in a minute. But the other thing that is also very important is that you are legally required to annually review your registration. That means you need, if you lose significant amount of birds, you need to update that information on the register. And this, as I said, this needs to be done annually. So I suggest you put a diary reminder to come up each year, just so that you can think, right, I need to double check that my registration is correct. Next slide, please. The exemptions. Basically, if you have, and it can be a chicken that lives solely in your house and does not go outside, you do not have to register. But that means it's fully housed in a dwelling or another outdoor structure. This doesn't include barns because little birds can get into barns. So it really must be something that basically they do not have access to the open air. And if you have to take your bird to the vet, so obviously you are taking it outside, that doesn't mean you have to register. That is an exempt for you to take your bird to the vet if necessary. If your birds are actually housed, but at any point you take them outside to be exercised, for training or to bird gathering or shows, you must register. So it's kind of looking at that bird could pick up avian influenza or be exposed to that. So that's why it needs to be registered. Next slide, please. The benefit of these changes. This will improve the disease control. It will enable the Animal Health and Plant Agency to better track and manage the disease and other diseases, because there's obviously Newcastle disease, it's not just avian influenza. It will enhance the communication. So if you're on the register, you will instantly get information sent direct to you. You're not waiting to be told or see it on the news. As soon as there is a case, you would be told how you can actually safeguard your poultry or your pets. And of course, it's more effective surveillance because it's not waiting for us to knock on every door to find out where they all are. It will be on a register, which means the control and the spread of the disease in the domestic setting will be more controlled. Your pets or your beloved chickens will be safeguarded more. Next slide, please. The registration deadline, as I've already said, was on Tuesday, the 1st of October. And again, the annual review is required. But the annual review is also required by the commercial flocks as well. So if they give up poultry keeping or they've increased their flocks by any great size, then they again are legally required to update their registration. Next slide, please. How you can register. If you have a county parish holding or a CPH number, this will be known to the farmers. It's how they run their farm. If you have this, then it is just a matter of completing the form, which is on the .gov website, or emailing customer registrations. It's a lot easier because the record is already there under your county parish holding number. Next slide, please. If you do not have a CPH number, then it's something that takes about 10 minutes if you do it online. I have gone through it myself and it's extremely straightforward and simple. I get very annoyed when you keep going through lots of different things and repeating things. It's very, very simple. And that is the web address to go to. Or you can actually do it over the phone just by calling the Animal Health and Plant Agency on this line. They're open from 8:30 till 5 is office hours. And again, it's very simple information. It's just your contact details. It's where the birds are kept, not necessarily where you live, your species, how many numbers of birds you have, and why you keep them. So it's very minimal information. Next slide, please. Okay, as I said before, during the last outbreak, a lot of the cases were in the backyard flocks. And one comment is that a lot of them didn't realise or didn't know, which is why, again, the registration will be useful because they will be instantly notified. The last outbreak was the H5N1 virus, which was mainly being carried in the birds that defecate in flight, which is like your swans, your seagulls and things like that, which is why it's really, really important that you cover your feed, your water, if they are outside. It's also, if it is possible, if you have to house them, that if you can have a cover over the top, just to stop the birds, if they defecate in flight, for it getting in and contaminating the ground without you realizing. Another good thing to think about this time of year is, do you have a contingency plan in place? Do you have an idea what you will do if you have free roaming birds now, how you can house them to keep them safe if the housing order came in, and how you can actually take steps with your biosecurity, cleaning your boots and everything else like that, which is very, very important. There's lots of good information on the .gov website. Next slide, please. So we've looked at how you can protect your stock, should they have to be housed. But other things to be considered is how you can provide enrichment during this period of housing. That once again, there's lots of great ideas. Some of them are quite funny, as you can see by the middle picture of a pink fluffy chicken. But swings, threading sprouts on string and hanging them up, they seem to love pecking at those, and it gives them a bit of enrichment. And apparently they even like mirrors, so I don't know, but there's some quite nice poultry looking at themselves in the mirror. Next slide, please. Once again, it's if a housing or a disease outbreak happens, again, look at how your pens are. Can the little birds get in? Can you prevent them? Repair any holes or gaps to stop the little birds getting in, fix leaks to stop any water contamination. It's all a lot of things that sometimes get overlooked, but during an outbreak is very important, can, you know, keep your pets safe. Next slide, please.
Nix, just while you're there was a question that's been put in the chat from Robin,
Mhm.
just to say, will they send an email reminder for the annual review for those of us who have just had to register for a flock of 49 and under? So
No.
no, they won't.
It's down to the keeper to update it in the legislation. So
Okay.
that's why having a diary reminder for yourself is always a good idea.
Thank you, Nix.
Thank you. Again, once again, is, you know, cleaning and disinfecting housing is good. Biosecurity is always a good idea, even when we're not in a disease outbreak. Disinfecting and cleaning hard standing anywhere near your poultry, and making sure there isn't standing water around where your chickens go. Next slide, please. A really good idea if you haven't subscribed already, and I have found that the subscription actually lapses. So just make sure that once you have registered, that you are getting the alerts, and if not, re-register. Basically, it's a very simple process again. You just register so that if there is any disease outbreak in the country, you will get a text alert or an email just to tell you that it's happening. So you'll instantly get the information again, on top of the fact that you have registered for birds. Next page, please. I think that covers it all. If there's any other questions, thank you very much for your time and for listening.
Thank you, Nicola. That was really good and really useful. Thank you. Nikki, are you able to just check, see if there's any more messages in?
Yeah, of course.
There's a hand up.
Yeah, there's no messages in the chat, but yes, Sarah has put her hand up. So yeah, ask away, Sarah.
Yeah, thank you. That's a really interesting presentation. What I was going to say, the definition between poultry and captive birds isn't as straightforward as you'd hope it would be, in terms of, yes, you've got the commercial units, but there's also kind of backyard flocks who have honesty boxes and things like that. So if you are selling eggs, then that's classed as poultry. So if they use any kind of production, then
Yes.
it is classed as poultry rather than captive birds. So even if it's a few that you're, as soon as you start selling any products from them, they are classed as poultry. So
Yeah.
I mean, regardless, obviously they still got the same registration. But yeah.
Yeah. Yes, yeah. It's they would then come under the commercial side of things.
Thank you. Robin's just asked if we could put the link in the chat for notification on the last slide, as we cannot copy directly from the slide for some reason. So I just wondered, is there any way that we can transfer that to the chat, please?
I can do that after I've finished sharing. So after we've done the presentation, I can copy and paste that in, because it's my screen that's sharing. So I can do that in a bit. I just can't do it at the moment.
Oh, brilliant. And but Robin will still have access to the chat.
He will, yeah.
Brilliant. So it'll go on
It
there.
will still
That's
come
great.
up. Yeah.
Super. Thanks, Sam. That's great.
I get round to it after a while.
That's brilliant. I wasn't sure how it worked after it closes down. So that's great. Thank you.
Can I just ask, Sarah, while you're online and about the avian influenza, sorry to put you on the spot, and you may not know, but when people are obviously concerned with avian influenza and they've got their own poultry, and potentially they've got, if we had avian influenza in our county, a few people then start panicking about eating their own poultry eggs. So I'm led to believe that they're allowed to, even with the housing order and everything, they're allowed to eat their poultry and their poultry products, unless they've got confirmed cases on farm. Is that right?
Yeah, that is the case. So there is a zoonotic risk with avian influenza, but the cases where people have been infected is when they're in close contact with a high density of birds or bird, feces, dander. So the risk of catching avian influenza from an egg that's laid outside and potentially where wild birds can defecate or something is very, very small, and sensible hygiene precautions. So if the egg's cooked and you're washing your hands after handling the egg, that should be sufficient. The risk of transferring the virus that way is very, very minimal. So I think as long as, obviously, if it's an infected premises, there are restrictions on the eggs, and they're likely to be destroyed if they're within that kind of at-risk period before it's declared. But otherwise there's no restriction on consumption of eggs.
No. Lovely, thank you. Any more questions?
I think Nicola's managed to put the link in the chat, so that's so brilliant. Good. Yeah, she's on
Thank you, Nicola.
So that's great. That was a great
welcome.
presentation, Nix, by the way. Really, really informative and really good. So well done. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Nikki, did you want to do your bit?
I'm very happy to say, as I mean, the people on the call have probably seen this slide a few times now, but we're coming to the end of the Future Farm Resilience funding that's available now. So we're looking at I think it's December that most of the delivery will be completed, but definitely by March, isn't it? I think, Sam. So we've just got a few months left of it. So I think if anyone that hasn't taken it up, that's either listening to this at a later date, then if you can, I would thoroughly recommend doing so. And there's all sorts of different ways of obtaining that support. So there's, as on the slide there, you've got your transition workshops, you've got one-to-one support, small group webinars, digital training, and wellbeing workshops, which is obviously part of what we're doing this evening. So I just think that there's the QR code, there's visiting the business information point, there's contacting them on the phone, and just seeing what there is available for you and your farming business. So I thoroughly recommend trying to get in touch with them, and hopefully there's a bit of support that you can still get from them in the last few months of the project. Really, they're not completely sure what's going to be provided after that time. Normally by now we've got a better idea, but unfortunately we haven't at the moment. So I'd still get your name in there and try and register with them if you can, because there might be ongoing support after that date. Thanks, Sam. And this is just also a slide that we pop on just to see if let you know about the up and coming webinars we're trying to do 2 a month until the end of the year, so until the end of December. And obviously if you just go to the Business Information Point site and look on the events, then you should be able to find the webinars that are up and running. We've also got a farm walk that we're going to put on. We're hoping to do another one up in Somerset, but we've got one in Devon on the 10th. That's next week on the 10th of October. We've got a lady called Jo Garlick who is coming along to speak from the Forestry Commission, and she's going to conduct the walk. And then we've got some other support services and some food, most importantly, that are going to join us. And again, if you go onto Eventbrite or onto the Business Information Point and then onto Eventbrite, you can register for that with us. It's a daytime event rather than an evening, obviously. Thanks, Sam. And this is our Hub of Hope slide that we try to share with as many people as possible. Obviously, this is an online service that you can type in and look for mental health support services that are near to you. We found this myself, Sam, and other colleagues have used it quite a lot across our county, mainly because, or the counties that we work in, mainly because obviously what's available in Somerset isn't necessarily available in Devon, but if you put in the postcode of the area of that the person lives that you're trying to find some support for, then it will get you through. You can choose a topic, whether it be anxiety, agricultural support, etc., and you can get the charities that are, it gives you it by mileage radius as well, so you can get what's available to you locally. Thanks, Sam. Yeah, and that's it. Well, I think I should leave this bit for you, Sam, really, because it's you that's hosted it this evening. Thank you.
Me and Nikki always come as a double act. One's not speaking, the other one's just behind the screens. So it's just a thank you, and please do get in contact with us if you have any questions or want anything to arise. And for those listening to the recording tonight, then please do get in contact with us. You can use these contact details, all the contact details near the beginning, and me and Nikki will be there to assist in any way we can. But I'd just like to thank our speakers for their time tonight, and I really appreciate their coming along, and for those who have engaged with us with their questions. That's really useful. So thank you, everybody. Much appreciated, and hopefully see you at our next webinar.